And we have over 1,600 funds, 700 million in assets under management. It's a beast to manage. And we have some that are very, very, very specific, and we have some that are completely unrestricted for us to put to where the greatest need is in Nashville. Unfortunately, we don't have enough. I'd love to have more of the unrestricted funding so that we could.
Hal Cato is a native Nashvillian, and he's always had a heart for helping others. Over the course of 3 decades, he has stood at the helm of some of Nashville's most prominent nonprofit organizations: Hands On Nashville, Oasis Center, Thistle Farms, and for the last year, the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. Now, that probably sounds familiar to our listeners. The Community Foundation is one of our sponsors at Banner & Company, so take that as full disclosure. But even before their generous sponsorship for our weekly podcast, we knew we wanted to sit down with Hal to learn more about how he arrived at a life of service, what motivates his work, and how close he really came to running for mayor. I'm Demetria Kaladimos. It's Banner & Company. You grew up here. Mm-hmm. What neighborhood, and do you still see any of your childhood crew?
I grew up just outside of Green Hills. I mean, we moved here in the late 60s. My dad was an early IT guy and moved here to work for NLT and was one of their very first information systems folks. This was the late 60s, and obviously Nashville was a really different community then. But I grew up just outside of Green Hills area, and had an amazing 70s childhood where you just get on your bike and go, and when the street lights come on, be back. And Nashville was such a fun place then, and your parents didn't worry about us. We just went. And yes, I run into childhood friends all the time. A lot of it's just accidentally, where you just run into somebody, whether it's in the airport or in a restaurant. But I love having those connections.
I know. Isn't it different when you see someone that you knew in 4th grade? Mm-hmm. They almost look at you through a different lens, too. And sometimes they're surprised as heck at what you've done.
They are, yeah. And obviously, thanks to social media, it's easy to stay. I mean, I've seen friends from 5th grade, and I know what their grandkids look like, even though I haven't seen that person in 15 years.
Right. Yeah. Was there an experience as a kid that sort of set your heart on service? Because you've dedicated a good part of your life to that.
There was, and I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was in the 4th grade, and I've always had a very close affiliation with my grandmom, and seniors were just, for some, I was that kid that just loved seniors. And I can remember it like it was yesterday, going to the, senior citizens, they call it senior citizens home, down on Broadway. And we went down there during the holidays to do a holiday party for the residents who were living there. And I remember seeing a woman who was sitting over by herself. Most of my friends were, at the big table. But of course, this is so me. I found the stray cat sitting over in a corner nobody was talking to. And I spent the entire 40 minutes just with that person one-on-one. And when I left, I will never forget, she gave me a hug and started crying. She had the best Christmas ever. And will you come back? And I did. And I don't know, it's just that little spark was planted where you realize that what a difference one encounter can make, but just showing up and sitting there and being there. And I think that's why I've still attracted to the underdog today. Those who are marginalized and just sort of on the outskirts, that's always where I'm going to run first.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did you get to Ole Miss? Was that a family thing?
That was a family thing. Yeah. This was, again, in the early 80s, you applied to 2 or 3 schools, maybe.
I remember, yeah.
It's just like, get in. All right, that looks fun, And so my family was originally from Mississippi. So there was a connection there. And I went and visited, and I just thought, this is a cool little town. Why not? It was that straightforward. There was no stress. There was no sweating it out. There was just like an acceptance, an application, and I went. Now, if I could do it over again, would I go back there? Probably not. But
But you're a different
sure
person,
enjoyed it. Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What did you study?
I had a double major in business and journalism. I know, right? I know. I thought I was gonna go into advertising. I remember growing up, I always wanted to be Darren Stevens.
The original
The
Darren or the
original,
second
no,
one?
either
Yeah,
one. I
yeah.
don't remember, but I wanted to be Darren Stevens and do advertising, and that's what I thought where I would be. And I quickly got out and realized that was not the field for me.
Something, though, planted the seed for what would become Hands On Nashville. How did that happen?
You know what it was? It was senior citizens again. After I lost my grandmother right after college graduation, I was devastated. And so I decided I wanted to do something to stay connected to seniors. So I started delivering Meals on Wheels. And I loved it. And at the time, I was in a job that was just, it was not me. So getting out during lunchtime and delivering meals gave me life. And I overcommitted, and I had signed up for too many routes. And I started calling and recruiting my friends and say, would you deliver wheel meals on Thursday and Tuesday and Monday? And I almost ended up running this little mini, office for senior citizens, staffing it. And then I saw a story one night on the nightly news about a national organization in New York called New York Cares. And I thought, well, that's cool. Why don't we create one here? Of course, I was 24. I didn't have any idea, but that's where the idea came from, was recruiting my friends to start delivering Meals on Wheels.
Did you recognize that Nashville had an extraordinary volunteer spirit and teamwork thing going even back then?
Yeah, I did, but it was hard to volunteer. If you were, in the junior league, you
Right.
could. If you were retired,
You had a
or
network.
you're at a network, and the only real volunteer opportunities for a 20-something-year-old was, pump kegs for the junior chamber at Summer Lights. It was just finding those things, and I was like, there's got to be more. And so coming up with an idea for flexible volunteer projects on evenings and weekends and lunchtime was a novel thing. And a lot of people ignored me and didn't think I knew what I was doing, that, nonprofits need more ongoing, dedicated 5-day-a-week volunteer. And it turned out that wasn't the case.
So when did Hands On turn into like a viable career for you?
Well, it never, people think I worked there. I never had a job. I was the founder, and I
And that
ran
was
it.
it?
That was it. And I ran it on the side because there was no money. Our budget that first year was $500, and I can still remember the donor who gave it to me. And so I didn't know there was such a thing as the nonprofit sector. I didn't know there were careers. I just didn't know. And so I was doing office leasing, and then I went into healthcare for a minute, and then I got involved in a startup called Corporate Childcare, late 80s, and that was when I really found a job that I loved. I was part of a company building on-site centers for big employers, so their employees could bring their kids to work.
Okay, am I hallucinating, or was that Marguerite Salee?
Salee, Lamar Alexander,
Yes.
and a guy named Bob Keeshan, who you may remember
Captain
as Captain
Kangaroo?
Kangaroo. Yeah,
Yeah.
nobody knows who Captain Kangaroo is today, but yeah, I used to get to travel around with him. It was a hoot.
I do remember that because it was very innovative and it became a news story.
It was. I mean, at the time, there was a big nursing shortage, and hospitals started opening childcare centers to get nurses to come back. And it's amazing. My first meeting this morning was with the state of Tennessee about how do we get more employers helping solve our childcare crisis. So flash forward all these years later, we're still struggling with it.
Yeah. You've been involved in lots of these marquee nonprofits, at least very well-known names in Nashville. Well, Oasis was already, I'm fast-forwarding a little, maybe
Yeah,
too
yeah,
fast,
no,
but
you go.
was
Push the
Oasis already up and running?
It was up and running. I had been doing childcare work for about 11 years. I was living in London at the time. They had moved me overseas to run their UK operations.
For corporate?
For corporate, yeah. Amazing job. An apartment overlooking the Thames. I was traveling all over Europe. I mean, most people were envious, but I was bored.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, have you ever caught yourself chewing a piece of gum and the flavor's gone and you're just chewing and chewing? And you're like, what am I doing? That was me professionally.
Something was cool in London,
Something
though.
was
I mean,
cool. Oh, yeah. I was being able to hop on the Eurostar and run down to Paris for a day was pretty neat. But I also was was growing bored professionally. And I knew there was something deeper inside of me. And I'll never forget, Lamar Alexander gave me a little book called Let Your Life Speak. And I remember reading that in a park in London. And it's all about the meaning of the word vocation, which is a word we don't really talk about much.
Priests and clergy talk about
Yes,
that.
they do.
Yeah.
But, people in the business world, you don't talk about vocation. We talk about our occupation, but not our vocation. And it dawned on me, I was not living into my vocation. It was time to make a change. And right about that moment, I got a call from somebody here in Nashville that said the Oasis Center is looking for an executive director. I heard you are maybe moving back, and would you be interested? And something inside of me just said, you need to talk to him.
Was that an instant fit? I mean, did you know this is probably good for me?
It was just, I was really, really listening to my gut at the time. And sometimes, if you listen to the outside voices, everybody's like, what are you doing? But the inside voice was telling me, you know what, this is something you need to do for reasons you can't explain to anybody else, but it just feels right. It felt like a calling in that moment. And I'm so glad I did, because that yes, I'll come and do that changed my life forever.
Yeah. Did you have like one-on-one relationships with those kids, or were you kind of the boss man in another room?
Both. It was really fascinating. This was when Oasis was in our old building on Music Row, and I had this little glass, I called it the aquarium. It was a glass office in the lobby. So I saw every kid and every parent that came through. They were sitting in chairs right outside my door. So I had lots of one-on-one interactions and conversations, and just got to know them. And that's when I really fell in love with the work, because if to get up and every single day and to worry about, is the board engaged? Are we raising enough money this month? How's staff morale? How's our partnerships with XYZ organization? What are our deliverables? Are we meeting the outcomes the city's expecting? That's not a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But when you get to know the young people and their families who your life, you're changing, that was my paycheck. And I'm still close to many of them today. I've stood with them at their weddings. I've been there after births of children. We
Wow.
celebrate Thanksgiving and Christmas together. It was great. This morning I was at Community Foundation, and there was a young man who was, and he's young in my mind still, who was a youth at Oasis Center who's now, a senior leader at MNPS. And so I see these kids now helping run our city. Knowing that they got their start at Oasis Center is really cool.
And remind us where these kids come from that ended up at Oasis.
Oasis Center, they would come, they could be homeless, they could be aging out of foster care, they could be coming from some of the nicest zip codes in town and just not have anybody who believed them, and they didn't believe in themselves. So we served young people from all walks and backgrounds. The core of who we worked with were those who were most disconnected and experiencing homelessness, oftentimes because of sexual orientation, because of aging out of foster care with just nothing.
Yeah, and it's still happening.
It's still happening, yeah.
It's Banner and Company. I'm Demetria Kalodimos. We'll be right back.
With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give them the coziest scuba matching set, the real gift is this. And this. And this. This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give a gift that goes beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at lululemon.com.
Thistle Farms, it seems to me, at least from the outside looking in, was already doing well, was well established and well respected. You put it on afterburners. Is it harder in some ways to take over something that's already established and doing well, where you don't have the obvious buildup?
Well, it's like different sports. a lot of the same muscles, but you're playing a different sport. So coming into an Oasis Center or Thistle Farms that's got a track record, they've got a donor base, they've got, a lot of things in place. It just might be a little lost in the weeds and they need somebody to help realign it and take it to a new place. It's very different from willing something, like I did with Sumo or Hands On Nashville, just out of nothing. So, yeah, I enjoy the turnaround more. I really do, and by this point, I'm pretty good at it. Thistle Farms had all the right ingredients, and who in this town hadn't heard of Thistle Farms?
Right. Yeah.
But what it didn't have was just the strategy and the focus, and just some systems that needed to be in place. That just wasn't the thing, and that's why Beck and I were such an amazing team for many years.
Yeah. Did you guys know each other well before you took over?
Not well, but I knew her. I went to church, and I never forget. She came up to me one day after church and said, "Hey, Thistle Farms needs a new CEO, and I want you to do it." And I looked at her, and I knew it was just this perfectly imperfect mess, And I was like, "There is no way that job is for me." Which, when Becca hears that, she translates to, "I'd love to." And the next thing I knew, I was in an interview with a group of women survivors. But to be honest, what scared me about the job was not the organization. It was, how are these women going to trust somebody who looks like me?
Yeah. I mean, you are not, forgive me for saying it, necessarily from their world.
Not at all. If anything, I look like every person who probably, tried to buy, sell, and abuse them. And so here comes this middle-aged white guy who's going to be we've never had a CEO. Now I've got to report to him. That whole thing scared me to death.
What was the best thing you found? What was the true strength of that organization? I'm thinking it's probably the women themselves.
It was how freely we could talk about love in our work and how we could center our work in love. When I came at the Oasis Center, it was sort of like an older school mindset. You don't tell the young people you love them. You don't become their family. They don't, there's just some boundaries. And yes, you do have to be careful. But it was just walking into a place where, when they say love heals, it is there every single day. And I also learned then that I was always looking for expert advice from the outside, but I realized it's sitting there in the circle. These women know what they need. It is their lives. They have made the mistakes. They've gotten up, they've fallen back down. They've gotten up, they've fallen down again. They know what it takes to heal. We need to listen and learn from them. And then it was my job to just open every door and window I could and bring the resources and the energy in to take it where it is today.
Yeah. So we are speaking a couple days beyond your 1-year anniversary at the helm of the Community Foundation. Mm-hmm. That sounds like something tailor-made for you.
Yes, everybody thought that. And I'm realizing now that it really is. It's like I can close my eyes and I can see every job I've ever done. Founder, real estate, childcare leader, social entrepreneur through Thistle Farms, working with multiple systems like the mayor's office and metro schools at Oasis Center. All of those things are converging into this job that it's the biggest thing I've ever done. I'm not going to lie, it's the hardest, but also I think it has the opportunity for the greatest impact for the city.
Yeah. Early on, in your tenure, there was a hiccup when it was kind of revealed that some disaster relief money got away from the books. What did you learn from that? And is that ancient history?
Yeah, well, it is ancient history. And all of that happened. I remember watching that go down. I was still at Thistle Farms at the time, so I wasn't there. And I remember seeing the story on the news. And I was like, because the Community Foundation had never had any bad press for 30 years. And I remember watching and going, what is happening over there? And I knew coming in to the organization that one of the first things that I had to do was to heal that relationship between Community Foundation, between the mayor's office, between United Way, between other funders. And, we're there. I mean, it is definitely ancient history now, but boy, it was painful at the moment. And at the time, when you look back on what was happening, you know, it was the beginning of a pandemic. It was the first month after a pandemic when that tornado swept through
Right.
Nashville. Nobody was working from the office. Everybody was trying to figure this out. And it was just the perfect storm, no pun intended.
Yeah. There are you were going to talk about what? Did you leave Thistle because Community Foundation came up?
No, I
Or
left Thistle because I learned at Oasis Center. I mean, I think one of the most important things a leader needs to know is when it's time to dismount. Too many don't. They stay on that horse until people are like, are they ever going to get off?
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that person. Don't be the last one to leave the party. And Thistle Farms was in such a good place, and sales were strong, and it was just cooking on all cylinders. And it's like, now's the time to go. You've done what you needed to do. You can sit here and like try to start reinventing things, but what they need is someone who's going to come in and kind of just let the dust settle and go into a little bit of maintenance mode and not building mode. And I'm not a great maintenance mode person. So I knew it was time to move on. I mean, I thought I was going to run for a bigger office. It was
Yeah.
really, really close to running for mayor. Got 2 weeks from that announcement, and realized this is not for me. And it was the week after that Community Foundation called when they heard I wasn't running and said, "Would you come in and talk to us?" And
you
here
beat
we
me
are.
to the mayor question.
Yeah,
But you were ready.
I was ready. Hey, I've got
You had your colors picked out and your signs.
we got 2 boxes of, in my hall closet at home, Hal Cato for mayor. I mean, we were there. But again, listening to your gut, getting still, listening to that voice within, telling you who you are, not outside voices telling you what they want you to be, but listening who you are. When I've learned when you do that and stay focused, you're always going to end up in the right place. And I did.
Wow. Would you ever do it? I mean, would you ever put those signs out?
No. I'm where I need. I'm where I need to be. And what's really fun is the things that I'm working on right now at the Community Foundation in terms of affordable housing, in terms of early childhood, in terms of strategic partnerships for how we create a higher standard of living for more Nashvillians that are being priced out of this place. That's all the things I wanted to do as mayor, and now I'm getting to work on it from another side of the table, but without the pressure or the limits of 4 or 8 years. And I'm big fan of our current mayor. We're friends. I love my conversations with him, and there's a lot of trust between us, and I think we're going to do some great stuff together.
Could some of the solutions on affordable housing come out of the Community Foundation, or would it take you having to convince these donors to change their priorities?
I think the solutions to affordable housing, they're not going to come directly out of the Community Foundation, but I think they can be convened by the Community Foundation, if that makes sense. Financial capital is obviously an important form of capital, but there's also social capital. There's informational capital, there's moral capital, there's reputation. We can leverage other forms. And I just met this morning with a group that represents 10 nonprofit, developers that are interested in working with us out of Imagine Nashville. We also, are running a catalyst fund for the city that's now up to $76 million that will be using to make low interest loans to mission-oriented developers to help preserve and create more affordable housing. So we're definitely an important actor, but no one holds the magic feather on this one.
Yeah. Is that one of the things that keeps you up at night, is the seeing the unhoused people or hearing the stories where I just can't afford to live here, it's my hometown, but I had to leave?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want Nashville to be a city where you have to be wealthy and white to live here. It's just not who we are. That's not what makes a city great. And that's the number one concern I have about our community right now. I want a city that's where everybody can not just survive, but thrive.
It's Banner and Company, and my guest is Hal Cato, CEO of the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. We'll be right back. Of course, this is a town and a group of people, Nashvillians, who love to give and love to accomplish things. But do you think they work together well enough? I'm talking about the United Ways, the community foundations, the nonprofits that really come to mind.
Collaboration it's hard, and the whole Nashville nice thing that we're a polite city and we want to be polite and to everybody. Sometimes I think gets in our way for speaking hard truths. And I've been a part of some really, really successful collaborations that have made a difference, and I've been about a part of some that were a disaster. And so I think it's our highest calling, honestly, as a community foundation, is how do we convene others in a new and a different way where you're building collaborations built on trust, humility, and a shared vision. If you have those three elements in place, there's no limit to what can happen, but you just pull one away and it falls apart. And we have too many nonprofits in Nashville. I'm just going to say it, because we don't know how to collaborate like we should. And we also, we get all headstrong on our idea and not the right idea or a bigger idea. And that really gets in our way. And I'm still seeing it happening.
And do you think we are duplicating efforts in some areas?
All over the place. Yeah, we're duplicating efforts all over the place. And the issues like affordable housing or our child care crisis, they're too big for any one nonprofit, any one elected official or government department to fix on their own. We have to work together. I think we've got a lot of little organizations that are great programs, but that doesn't mean you're a whole organization. And so how can that program go be a part of a larger entity, or how can several of them come together? But we don't need to be creating these little bitty programs that somebody has a great idea, but there are 18 other people already doing this. It may be just slightly different, but I guarantee you we can come together.
You and I'm going to pivot here, but you and Michael are sort of a power couple, at least in my eyes.
Well,
I think he once told me that he watched you give a presentation and was in awe.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He didn't tell me that.
Oh, he told me. He told
Okay.
me. And I think you guys didn't even really know each other at that point in time. And he was this powerful entrepreneur, and it might have been your app that you were trying to sell.
No, he came to. I met Michael. I was still at Oasis Center, and he was running a summer institute for college students, and they were looking for a nonprofit to adopt and to help a nonprofit solve a business challenge. And I was like, I want to build an app. I was thinking about it at the time, and so he brought a group of students over, and that's how we met. I didn't know him before then.
Yeah. Why do you think you guys clicked? You obviously have some of the same strengths as leaders and developers, et cetera, but there got to be some yin and yang kind of stuff.
I think we have a lot of shared values at the core of who we are, about what we care about, and the kind of legacy that we each want to leave. We love to see other people succeed. Look what he's done for the entrepreneur ecosystem. That's what I've tried to do in the nonprofit space. And we just, we both know we're here for a short time, so make an impact.
Growing up in this town, did you ever foresee that you would be so freely accepted as a couple?
Never. I remember I was outed in this town. It was a social column. Remember Catherine Darnell?
Of course,
Cat in the Hat. I remember Catherine Darnell, and she didn't mean to. She was just listening who was at an event, and she had me as another person as a couple. And I remember, oh boy, this is out there. And
so previous to that,
to that, no, I had been, I just didn't think I was safe to be openly gay in Nashville in the 80s and 90s. It was just a very different time. But that actually ended up being a real gift because it pushed me out there. And so, no, but I also remember a boss coming and seeing me after, seeing it in the paper, said, I'm okay with it, but you just need to be very, very careful in the future, And so that was always in the back of my head. But, Yeah, it's hard to believe, how far we've come as a community.
And I would think, though, there's still a lot of people that need educating and some human kindness.
There are, it was when I looked at the Imagine Nashville data that
Yeah.
came out, and we asked a question about belonging and who feels like they belong in this community. And it was 78% of the overall survey respondents said they feel like they belong in Nashville, but the population that felt the least sense of belonging was the LGBT population. Almost 50% of LGBT respondents to that call said they don't feel like they belong here. And look at it. When the state's passed 21 anti-LGBT laws in the last 15 years, with more on the books, I'm sure, in the upcoming session. So I get it. I feel incredibly privileged to get to sit in the seat that I do and to get to have this role. And I'm thinking about it every single day in terms of how can I don't think, power if you don't use power to make a difference, it's wasted.
Yeah.
So how can I use my, quote, power to make a difference for the LGBT community?
Yeah. Have you had any breakthrough moments with people that you thought were too hard to crack?
Our trans community. We hosted a series in partnership with the National Bar Association. We hosted a series of name change clinics on Saturday mornings at the Community Foundation office. We had several hundred people come in, and I would see them come through the doors just scared to death. Like, am I going to be accepted here? What is this building? And leave with the certificate and after one-on-one with a lawyer. And I, tried to go around and meet as many people as I could and let them know we're so glad you're here and feel welcomed. And yet I didn't feel comfortable talking about that service project very much. And that's my own issue that I've got to get through.
Wow. What a great event, though.
It was a phenomenal event. And this was in the heat of the last legislative session when they were just being pounded every single day. But I also know we've got fund holders who might not be happy that I hosted that event.
Did you hear anything?
No, I didn't. But I have heard from fund holders, who thought, we might be going too woke. And I've had people cancel their funds, because we support a group of Black and brown social entrepreneurs called The Village, and really leaning in and trying to help leaders of color, especially those who come from marginalized communities, and they understand the problems with violence because they've lived it. And so I am trying to, again, open the doors and windows to lift as many parts of the city as we can.
I mean, community is part of the name of the foundation.
It is. I told the interview team when I first went in there, I said the most important word in our name is community and not foundation. And we got to lean in on that.
Banner and Company is a production of the New Nashville Banner. Our producers are Steve Harouche and Andrea Tudhope. Original music is by Verlin Thompson. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or go to NashvilleBanner.com. You're in good company. We do a little thing here, Hal, where the final question is in the fishbowl.
Oh.
And it was posed by someone that was in that chair before, so there's only two of them in there right now, so you don't have a whole lot of choice, but
Okay.
choose one and
All right.
read it out loud. And
Let's see what we got here. Other than a pink piece of gravel. From Jared Sullivan. Oh my gosh. Okay. Who's the meanest?
You can just use first names or
Okay.
maybe an alias.
You know what's cool? First name would be somebody named Ricky, who just bullied the hell out of me growing up. And now we run into each other all the time, and it's great. But yes, I was terrified. And he also, it's the first time I ever heard the word fag. And so sensing that in the 70s, that gets in your psyche.
Yeah.
So that bully, but you know what? I love the fact that we're now friends and can be really happy to see each other when I bump into him out and about in Nashville.
All right.
So
Ricky.
there you go, Ricky.
Turn yourself around.
Ricky, turn yourself around. We turned that friendship around too. We came a long way.